The more you try to keep me down and keep my head above the water, you can never hold me down. The more you try to block me out, that's where I kick the wall down. You can never hold me back. The more you try to put me out, the more I'll be blazing, it's too hot. The more you try to put me in the dirt, increase my work, the expert. You see the hunger in the eyes of a survivor. Swallowed my pride, washed down with some saliva. Reinvented my whole life, mental MacGyver. One door shut, another open up brighter. Listen, battle drums in the distance, moving with enough force like army tank pistons. Pray for the strength of Jah to fight resistance. Fight mode, shields up, moving with resilience.
The strength of 1,000 lion and the strength of 1,000 giant. Please stay strong. Please stay strong. With the strength of 1,000 elephant and the strength of 1,000 tiger, we stay strong. We stay strong.
Hey everybody, it's Casey with Pinecase. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this fine Tuesday evening. We are hanging out with Danny Hernandez, also known as Def3. Listen, darling, I owe you a massive apology because I somehow labeled this stuff EDM, Shambhala, and all of these great titles which you're absolutely associated with. However, I went down your beautiful rabbit hole today and discovered that you're West Coast Vancouver Canadian hip hop standard. And I didn't mention any of that in any of this stuff today. And I was like, oh my God, does this remind me of home? So thank you so much for taking me on this journey that I absolutely needed on this fine afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this. So.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. Just a little bit of a backstory. I'm kind of curious to know how you got on the hip hop scene in the first place. Like, because Vancouver, we're going back 15, 16 years. That was a pretty heavy duty place, especially for music. And I'm really interested on how you kind of blossomed into the scene a little bit.
Yeah, so my journey in hip hop started actually, I guess, as a listener. I used to live in Saskatchewan in the 90s. And before I lived there, I lived in Texas, which was where I discovered rap. And then I moved to Regina, Saskatchewan in 1992. And this was right, when hip hop was kind of in this interesting, it was really not in the beginnings, but it was like in the best, the best stuff. And I was just fortunate enough to grow up in the 90s as a teenager. And so I kind of, through really what a big catalyst for all of this stuff was skateboarding. And so like I my whole life I felt very, I was super shy. I was very like, felt like an outsider kind of everywhere I was because I moved around so much. And then when I started skateboarding, I just kind of felt, I just felt like I found my people. And then from that, I got into punk rock music and to rap. And then it didn't take long for me. I was kind of like started, really fell in love with hip hop music. And I had this friend, his older brother, and it was named Chris Kent, and he was like the coolest guy in high school. And he worked at HMV, and he just like gave us like all the best music, like all the best of the best stuff when it would come out. And so like he would drive us to school, and I'd be like listening to like Ice Cube and Public Enemy and Wu-Tang and Snoop Dogg, like all when they came out. And so like, that started, it was like starts with me rapping along. And then this is, and then there was just as far out as it could be in Saskatchewan, there was a crew of people who were rapping, and I was like, I could do that. And so started doing that. And then, but at the time there was no scene there. And so it was interesting learning about it and understanding where we fit in. And so kind of similar to the Northwest of America, like that you have this movement with like Atmosphere and all these guys. I
Mhm.
met the right people, and we were just doing it because we loved it so much, and so we were throwing battles, and we were this is pre 8 Mile, like, and
Really?
it was just purely based on the organic love of hip hop that had made its way to small town Canada. And then I guess we started to kind of get a little bit more known, and this would have been um I think I went to college in Calgary in 2001, and I was doing it for about 6 months. And then I was like, I think I want to be a rapper. Like, it really started. I met this other guy, and it kind of started to seem like an option. And so I just pretty much took my student loan and put out a rap album. And like we had been making mixtapes in high school that we were selling for $10, and this is like cassettes. And then when I there was another guy by the name of Factor that is still one of my best friends. He had a label in Saskatoon and a hip hop shop, and we just kind of partnered up. And through him, he kind of was plugged into, an international scene, which was, our first tour. We started touring across Canada, and so I think the first Canada tour I did was 2001, maybe late 2001 or 2002, right after college. And then I met this guy who's now, still a good friend of mine, Emotions. He used to run a night called Monday Night Live. And so for years we were always coming out here like 2-3 times a year, just like, all right, we'll go out, we'll go play whatever, Red Deer, Lethbridge, Calgary, every city we could. And we just pretty much just call places and be like, can we come play? Like, we don't care if we get paid. And we'd fill up a car with people. And like over time, I think it always felt like we just accumulated our thing, like one person at a time. It was like playing in the, like the most ridiculous places and scenarios. And so that went on for a long time. And like, through the 2000s, we had a few like random things. Like we had a song that kind of popped off in Japan. So we did a Japan tour in 2006. And as I always felt like a big fish in a small pond kind of thing living in Regina. And so in 2010, I kind of decided to move here. And at the time I was friends with there's a group that I joined when I first moved out west called Sweatshop Union.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
they were pretty
Yeah.
well known. And so
Yeah.
my first,
Mo's
yeah,
been
you
on
probably
here
know,
actually. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh, you've
Good.
had Mo. So
Yes.
Mo is the best.
Yeah,
Sorry, there's a
absolutely.
plane flying over me.
Good.
Hopefully the Vancouver sounds are, I'm on a patio right now, but and so really so when the weird connection with that was that the very first guy I ever made like I guess I say professional, but wasn't really professional, was a guy named Mark Keston. And so he was actually Sweatshop Union's manager. So I met them, and they stayed at my house way back in 2001 when they were on tour. And then we just kind of kept in touch, did a few shows here and there together. And like at the time I had like um I had connected with like the Swoller Members guys, and me and Mocha only did an album in 2006 or 7 just through a tour. So Mocha was really kind of my first like official plug into the West Coast scene, where it was like, he was at the time, he was one of the most popping guys out.
I
And
was
so
gonna say that's one hell of a plug, man. Like, what are you talking about? That's a way. That's one way to do it. Like, I mean, that is again, like that is the royalty of Canada in that scene for me, especially being from Vancouver. Like, when I started going through your catalog of music, I was like, I know these people. Like, this is it. These are the people. Like, this is one hell of a way to do it. So, congratulations on that being kind of the jump off for you, because yeah, some really cool people in there.
it was honestly, I feel very like, I look back in time, and sometimes you think that it was just such a coincidence of how it all came to be. But I think part of the reason why I was like, and I haven't really thought about this until it's been something that I had to really decide whether I was going to continue doing it or not. But it was just, I loved it so much. And I feel like whenever I'd meet, like if I was the opening act on a tour, that's how I met Mocha. I was just like, someone asked me if I wanted to drive on this tour and open, and I was like, yeah, sure. And we just hit it off. And then he was like, we should hang out. And then he came to Regina, and we did we did like half an album in one night, and then he came back, and then that was really the catalyst, like outside of all the other stuff we were doing. And so when I moved to Vancouver, it didn't take long. It was a few months, and my friend who was a DJ, he was DJing for Sweatshop Union. He moved to Australia, and he was like, "Yo, these guys need a DJ. Do you want to just roll?" And so they asked me to join their crew, kind of like right out the gate, and I was like, "Why not?" And so that was an interesting switch, because we weren't even really like, it wasn't like I had a totally different style and sound, but as people, so I started DJing for them and opening up every show they did. So they were already touring the US extensively, and so I was too, just kind of on my own with my crew. And so it was kind of interesting, because I got to play like maybe 70 or 80 shows a year with them, and then I was doing another like 30 or 40 on my own. And so it was just like, there was a point from 2005 to 2015 where I was doing 100 to 120 shows a year, and it was just really just getting my my stage time. And so I think that really helped, and I feel lucky that, I've always been like a DIY go-getter kind of person. So like, I was just constantly told, no, there's no scene for that, we're not accepting. So I'm the type of person that was like, okay, well then I'll build my own. And so for me in my community, it was like, okay, well, what do we got to do? Let's do our own shows. We'll partner with the metal guys, we'll partner with the indie rock guys. And so as soon as I moved to Vancouver, it was like, oh, sweet, there's more people. And so like, for example, with me and Mo, like we hit it off. And so it was kind of just like, it felt like I had all these, extensions of trying to just find someone who was like in that world. And when I moved to Vancouver, they all just locked in. And so it was like, oh, sweet, you do that, sweet. And it was just the natural progression. Funny, I think they have an album called that, um, of how it all came to be. And so it really was just like, and then that took me on this whole other wild ride. And it was funny, because I never really thought about it at the time of what was happening, or even that where hip hop was going and what was happening with it. It was constantly evolving. And so for me, I thought it was just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and not realizing there's so many other cultural influences that are changing. And it felt like it was going to be forever. That that time where the scene was so poppin', you have like underground rap groups selling out the Commodore, and like, and then it over time, things,
favorite venue for sure.
it's dope. And like, so you start to, but over time things change, life changes for everyone. And so I've really been able to see, like, I've been doing it professionally, I guess professionally, since 2003, nonstop, outside of COVID. And it was yeah, I just feel really lucky to have been there, like while it was happening, really.
I think it's so neat to hear that, like, you don't, again, like a regular dude doing extraordinary things, right? Like, to think that, I mean, I'm actually headed to Saskatchewan tomorrow morning, and I've been there
Oh,
before.
really?
And we're leaving here pretty early, but, and so I've been there, I've seen what that area looks like. And although it has its beauty and charm, especially a certain, twilight and times of the year and things, like I've taken moments to really appreciate it. I would imagine that, when you're interested in these, kind of like bigger industry ideas, it'd be really challenging to come up in a space like that. You're like, I need people around me that can support me. I mean, even today, having you behind in the green room, like, we ran damage control, and you helped me out so much. Like, there was, and so to have people that are, that know more than you it's essential to growing. And so growing up in a place like, or not growing up, but being in a place like that, I would imagine it being a little bit challenging sometimes. So it's interesting. And then to just drop into Vancouver and have everybody, be there kind of available like that, on a hinge of a friendship. 'Cause that really is
Yeah,
how it works, right? Like, it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful.
it really is. It's I think there's like something to be said about just raw passion for something. Like that was kind of always my, I guess, when you get told no so many times, you really have to um you really have to believe in it and so much, and it really never occurred to me that it wasn't possible. There was definitely times that, but anytime someone would tell me no, I was like, fine. Like if it was a festival that decline, I'm like, I'll throw my own festival. I don't need you. And it was like this like, in a way, but the funny thing about it the whole time was that a lot of it was just like, me work, it's like a journal slash me navigating my own life and then just sharing the experience with other people. And so I always took rapping pretty seriously, as far as just like always doing it. And I remember Mocha said something to me when I first met him, and I was telling him about like, I don't know if I can do I don't know, like it's so hard to like make money and stuff. And he was like, this is like the most classic moment. He was like, it's pretty easy, man. Like the whatever you do the most, you're gonna get good at. So if you just rap all the time, you'll get good at it, and then it'll be your job. I was like, well, I guess, like, and this is at the time where he's got hit songs and stuff, and he's got like #1 tunes on the radio, and I was just like, and so it was cool. Like he was a big mentor for me, and there was definitely other people who helped me along the way. Like the initial crew that I started kind of rolling with was a crew from Winnipeg called Freak Show, and there was another group of guys that are still pretty are now reactive again, is Peanuts and Corn, so John Smith and McEnroe, who are also kind of like legends in the Canadian hip hop scene. This is the pre-Drake era, and it's interesting because there was this whole crazy community before that, and it felt like a while, like when that kind of he started popping off, it just kind of wiped out this whole history where I was like, well, what the fuck happened? And so a lot of that, Canada was in this, like, and Australia still kind of is there too, like they're in this weird time capsule where like hip hop was still like not fully commercialized yet.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those people and those opportunities, it was just like I never took it for granted. And just, I guess I've learned now there's a lot of reasons why, but just, I think if you just try to be a good person, other people will maybe help you as well, like
just be kind to each other. I mean, honestly, I think, at first I just want to take a quick second to say, like, shout out to everybody that's hanging out with us tonight. My heart's over at Scar Nation, so Scar Nation, stand the fuck up. 2%ers, stand up. DJ Lion, we see you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We appreciate all of you guys. No, it's interesting. I actually, like, back to this Drake thing real quick, because there is this part of like Canadian hip hop lore, like Word and Conrad Old Money, and like, I mean, Snack before Snack was Snack, and like, a bunch of that stuff. And it's interesting when people talk about music and they like blow right over top of all these super amazing artists, and to think that that the rest, okay, maybe not the rest of the world, but the States at least can minimize Canadian hip hop to Drake, I find quite irritating.
It's insulting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, totally.
I've gotten into so many arguments over the years, and again, it was like, now it's like there was there was a point where every province had like I shouldn't say guys, people. Mm-hmm. And BC had initially it was like the Rascals, Swollen Members, Sweatshop Union. You had Snack and the Stompdown Guys, and then then you move over to Alberta, and there was there's a small scene there, like Dragonfly Empire, and there's a dude IP, a couple of the Cam the Wizard, a couple other cats, and then you had Saskatchewan, which was me, Factor, and then we had a label called Side Road, and then you have Winnipeg, which was all those guys I mentioned earlier, and then you move into Ontario, and you got like this, and it felt like everyone knew everyone. And at some point, it was interesting. I was recently watching, I guess not recently, like a couple years ago, there was a documentary that was on this record store in Toronto. It was like the Canterbury Drop the Needle. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. Actually.
it's really fascinating about just like, and so the whole time I'm watching it, and um DJ Chemo from the Rascals was my DJ for a while, and so he's in it, and Scratch Bastard, and all these people that I've worked with over the years and known, and and it kind of like was crazy because I was like, wow, I know everyone in this, and these are all homies, but there's not one mention of the Prairies, and it's like all of these people were touring through there and doing it, and it's kind of funny that so outside of Canadians as a whole being omitted from this whole like American history of it, I've always felt that extra omittance from being from the Prairies. And so, anytime there was oh, we're doing a hip hop celebration, I'd be like, oh, sweet. And then you'd be like, why is it only people from Toronto and Vancouver? Like, that's not, these people were the people who were hitting me up and we are throwing shows for them. And so, but with that, the now seeing what happened to Drake, it's like I've never really like been on that team because until like I always felt like he disrespected that whole thing, and a couple of years before he did do this like road to OVO thing where he showed love to like the Rascals and a few people, but it was very minimal, and it was like 10 years too late. It was like,
yeah, totally. And way to cherry pick some stuff. I mean, I feel that felt very like not a publicity stunt, but like sort of, you know what I mean? Like there again, like
totally.
You said, there's so many other things that could have happened in that, and they're just like, okay, this is what we're gonna do here. It's like, and no shade to the Juno Awards, but it feels very like that, right? Like I don't want to get into the politics of it because
I think we're on the same. I think we're on the same tip with all that stuff. Though.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really frustrating, and now I'm like stuck in this weird space where like I really want to highlight people. Obviously, I got mad respect for you 100%, but yeah, I feel like I'm kind of up against that. To be quite honest, actually, I'm not even sure if, even as a Canadian, if I could actually kind of put people onto a map like that. Like the way that you explained it, I'm like, that's kind of the way that we should be talking about it. That's kind of the way that their kids need to learn about it. Like it would be kind of interesting to have like a Canadian festival where we highlight it province to province and kind of bring it back to like the way that it should be represented. Like where is that happening?
You know what it is, and this gets, I don't want to go too far ahead of myself again. Mm-hmm. This is why I moved into a new genre.
Yeah.
It's largely because over time, those communities and just the essence of hip hop and the community, it unfortunately, I don't want to say it died, but it just got slowly thing. And it's such an ego driven genre. It's like, like along with all the good, there's a lot of bad that goes with it. And it's like this prize fighter mentality of I'm the best. And there's I talked about this recently of just the idea of like abundance versus scarcity mindset. And unfortunately, hip hop is a very scarcity mindset. And it's a lot of like, I'm not going to share any opportunities with you because it's going to take food away from me. I'm not going to plug you into this because I'm the best. And you're like, as you age, especially once I entered like my 40s, late 30s, I was like, fuck, this feels like childish. Like, why am I even in this? Like everything I love about it is kind of gone. Like no one cares about the elements of hip hop, at least on a media level. And I felt like those are kind of the things that were designed to keep it in check. And so, I tried definitely many different times to do stuff like that. And whenever I'd see it, but I think because of, and I'm not going to say this is just hip hop, but sometimes a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, whether it's funded by like drug dealers, gangs, things, or people who are trying to profit, make a quick buck, it often like would taint the integrity of it growing and becoming more and more what it was. And so the only stuff that was really getting shown to the mass media was the stuff that was being controlled by major labels, and especially post Drake era. And so they have complete control of that. And so all of those things and all the things that, maybe that we grew up in and loved about it, they didn't even have a chance to blossom. Like it was like at this point, like, wow, this is so cool. And then all of a sudden it was like, you know what, let's just put concrete over the whole thing and start over. We're going to start with this one thing.
That's exactly how it feels, even as a consumer. I mean, like, okay, like maybe not as a consumer, like even for me, I can go back a little bit and remember like Toys for Tots drives when everybody was like graffitiing on t-shirts and we were selling them to make some money. Like, you know what I mean? We can go back to like, like feeding the homeless on East Van, like at Shop Wrong, you know, and everybody was in there. Ghostface Killer was in there, like on open mic nights and shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and there was so much happening. You could pick up like a really cool outfit that this chick made out the back of the shop, like for half their, like it was just so much. It was so much fun. It was so much fun, and everybody was doing good shit, right? We had fish on the barbecue or whatever, and everybody was eating. And I don't know. It was just like one day I kind of looked back, and it was just like, exactly like you said, just someone just threw concrete over top of it and just trudged forward, and everyone was left just being like, "Guess we're going to work." Like,
you know, I've never used that analogy until now, but it kind of is like, it just it's how I see it. Like because I remember it was like this eclectic garden of just like, wow, what's this? I don't even know what this is. And it was like I was talking about how I did a podcast with a cat Dubious from I think Edmonton. Or Lethbridge maybe, and we were just talking about, you know, the underground scene in the late 90s and 2000s in Canada, and how it was just it was so like an oasis of just like, wow, this is so cool. Like the weirder the better. Like there was something for everyone, and that's what I loved about it, when everyone didn't sound the same, or like it was this. And so when all of that kind of like, you know, when you start to see whether it's people who are you know, die, or people who end up in jail, or, you know, there's also like a whole other side of like, especially growing up in Saskatchewan, because there was gang related rap stuff. There was, you know, there's a lot of outside influences that are changing and shaping things. And I think that,
yeah, you can't really talk about selling drugs now without being like, people being like, what's such a manslaughter charges, right? Like people, it's like, yeah, it's a different climate out there, because it's not like I mean, not to say like you could always, you know, rap about selling drugs. I mean, do you? If that's your life, like that's your life. I'm not going to sit here and talk about where I am or am not from. But now people are like, you know, even the recovery community has a trouble with talking about, you know, selling drugs. And I mean, that's what what all their freaking content is about, is like being on or off of it. So yeah, it's a tough crowd right now for that kind of stuff. It's a tough crowd. Although we're all still kind of poor, right? Like nothing's really changed that much. Like we're all still sitting on the stoop, or at least that's kind of still my favorite place. So I don't know why we're trying to act like it isn't when it is, but you know.
I think too, like, and so you have that, and then you throw in the new change, which I think really changed in 2021. And this was basically the last. Authenticity went out the window. And that was the last remaining thing. And not to say that it's not still there and there's not artists who are shining through it or doing well without it, but all of a sudden income social media, where it really starts to like, and streaming and all these things where you can, like, no one's checking, like no one cares. Like you could, you know, you have people like Rick Ross who are like claiming one thing. This is like where that's what the focus comes, who like, this dude has nothing to do with anything gangster, comes from anything. And then you have just this replicated over and over again. And then I think it got to this point where, like, for me anyway, like I love hip hop. I still love it. I love the culture of it. I love all parts of it, but it just felt like this, like Frankenstein, like, what the fuck is this? Like, I don't even know. And so pardon my language, but like,
it's all good.
And so, you know, it felt really like, I don't even know where I fit into all this. And it seemed like the more everything that I loved about it had, you know, faded away a bit. And so I guess, I don't know if you want to wait, but I can kind of go down it was around 2015 where I was feeling like, you know,
like,
there
where
had
did the shift happen for you? Because it wasn't, I mean, there was some truth to the EDM Shambhala title to this podcast, right? I mean, obviously you made quite an entrance into that. Is that where you were going with that, or did I just really cut you off?
No, that's totally where I was going with it. And I was feeling like, I think around the time the big shift for me happened in 2015. And so I was playing, like, I played raves, you know, here and there. And I was such a purist hip hop guy. I was like, I'm not gonna make any of this music. It just I was so uneducated in what it was. And until I had gone to Shambhala, I was like, whoa, this is insane. And so, that time I'm seeing people, and I remember the first people I ever heard really make an electronic rap song was Emotions as Stylist, and being like, yo, this is so dope. Like, I want to do this, but I can't. I'm not allowed to. And so I'm sitting there watching, and like every year I'm seeing DJ homies who are hip hop DJs who are like, I make dubstep now, I make house music, I make this, and I'm like, damn, that's it. Go check their set. I'm like, man, I totally see why you do this. It's fun. It's like there's this essence of dance music, and like really enjoying that. And I've always made fun stuff, but once I started to see it in the environment that it was supposed to be in, it almost felt like, I understood it. But then there was this weird purist mentality that I wasn't allowed to do it, because it was like, and so I always compare it to when I first started skateboarding. At the time, skateboarding wasn't cool. And so like the first 6 months I was skateboarding, I was kind of embarrassed to have my skateboard, because I like other people were like, what are you, a fucking skater now? Like it was like this thing where you're like, oh, I don't know. Like, I'm like, and so, but it didn't take me long to be like, yeah, I am. And these are my people, and this is what I do, and this is all I'm going to do. And so I had been battling that for years. And it wasn't until like people had asked me in that world to do stuff, and I was like, nah, I don't really want to, because in my head I'm thinking like, what would my peers think, what would my thing, and so I got to this point around 2014 2015 where I was kind of like, I'm trying to think how old I was entering my 30s, and I was definitely going through this phase of like, what am I doing with my life, like, is this even reasonable, like, and it was kind of like this I was feeling very lost, and I was feeling like I don't even know where to go, because to me, I'm looking at all like my heroes, and they're all broke. And like, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of them are struggling. And so like, why am I going to continue to do something that doesn't seem like it even has it doesn't even seem like an option anymore, at least not like what it was before, where I'm like, oh, you can sell it to Commodore, make an underground rap. And so I went on this trip, and it was kind of like just trying to figure out what I was going to do. And so I went to, I went to Denver, I went to LA, I went to San Francisco, I went to like a bunch of places, and just try to figure out like what's going on in these cities, to try to like figure out musically. And everywhere I went, it was just like electronic music. And so I'm sitting there watching, like, you see MCs pop up, and like outside of a few, I'd be like, these aren't really good MCs, like not the ones that are like, that I know, that are like battle tested, like whatever it is. And not to say that has to be the premise of it, but there was a group, the first people I ever did an electronic song was with this now pretty popular house duo named Ski Tour. And they hadn't even figured out what they were doing yet. And so we did this song. And so then right away they were like, would you want to come play with us at this huge rave, like to thousands of people? So I was like, sure, well, go do this one free rap over some. So then I'm slowly getting pulled into this world, and almost to the point where like every weekend I'm going and playing with these guys, and playing these massive crowds and these awesome parties that are just all like about love, and there's no fighting, there's no like anything. And then going back to these hip hop shows, it was just like, fuck, this is kind of like not as fun as that. And like so eventually I just started to kind of do this, and it really, around that year I was like, I think I know what I need to do. And then on that trip I was in Denver, Colorado, and just out of the blue, like I paint graffiti and murals too. And there was this guy that I knew named Pat Milbury, and he's a super connected dude. Like he had booked us for some shows when we were touring through there years ago, and he was really plugged into that scene. And he was like, yo, I'm gonna take you to this, or maybe he was even throwing the show, like this dude Late Night Radio. He's like, yo, we're gonna check out this show. So we go to the show, and I was like, yo, this is like, I didn't know about Pretty Lights or any of this kind of like hip hop influenced bass music. They were calling it electro soul at the time. And I was just so like blown away, like, man, this is not at all like, I didn't even know this world existed. And so he introduced me to him that night, late night radio, and he had just sold out like the Fox Theater in Boulder, which is
Yeah.
like probably 1,000 people. I'd never seen anything like this. And so I came home being like, I know what I got to do. It's this. I have to find this thing. And so I went back there a month or two later, and that same guy was like, yo, I talked to late night radio. I showed him your stuff. He wants to work on some stuff. And so he just dropped me off at his house. I didn't even know this dude. And we ended up making a song, and then that turned into an album, and then another album, and we became best homies. And so the whole time we were working on this stuff, he's playing venues like Red Rocks and be like, do you want to come down and rock with me? And I kept getting these opportunities where we're just like, man, this is stupid. And every time I'd come home, I'd be like, why am I even not fully pursuing this?
Yeah.
And
like it's time to jump in both feet.
it's time to do this.
Yeah.
And so like it just kept being these scenarios where I'd be like, whoa, like this is the answer is right under my nose. Like, why am I feeling lost? Like, and so, so then I just fully committed around 2018. I was like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. But not realizing at the time that I'm essentially pressing reset because nothing I've done in rap matters in electronic music. This is still something I'm facing where I have to break a lot of ground, especially as a rapper in a DJ's world. And it's been, in a way super humbling because you go like, well, I've done all this stuff. And it's like you're carrying around all these accolades only for people to be like, I don't even care about that. Like, why are you trying to like, that has nothing to do with this. And so my journey through all of that, aside from, the things I was going through as an individual, was essentially like learning to let go of all this shit and really just getting back. I call it like the resurrection. It was like I had to re-fall in love with art and music. And so that was like, I can ramble for hours about it, but like that's kind of gotten back to the root of it. And then, and then it was almost like starting over. And I kind of went through a lot of the same things again, like the heartbreak, the rejection, except I was doing it as, in my late 30s and 40s versus in my early teens and 20s.
Did you feel more like resilient to that kind of heartache because you'd gone through it before, or did it feel worse because you were like, we're getting too old for this shit? Like,
you know what? It felt worse in a way. Like it was, and I've now learned like later, like I got diagnosed with ADHD, and whether that was also a journey where I didn't even believe in that. Like it was like, and also with like, other aspects of my own traumas and stuff that I didn't realize that were trickling their way into everything I was doing. And, especially with like, I don't know if you've ever heard of RSD or like rejection sensitivity, like that was a really big struggle for me. So instead of someone just being like, no, we're not going to book you, I took it as like everything you've ever done is not worthy of this. And you don't fit in here. And, from the way that I grew up being moved around so much, which is another thing of trauma.
Completely adds to that whole situation. Like,
it does, because you don't feel like you belong anywhere.
Yeah.
And
I didn't mean to laugh, but it was like, as soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, it's not like pack your shit and get out. But really, they're just like, man, this just isn't it right now. Like, it's like, come back next Tuesday. Let's try this again. But yeah, the whole world feels like it's like crashing around you. Like, idiot. Like, I don't know. And I didn't mean to laugh in that moment, but I absolutely understand how it feels because it's horrendous. Meanwhile, you're totally wicked, like absolutely celebrated artist. So none of that is realistic to like the world around you. But yeah, I didn't mean to laugh, but I'm just like, dang.
No, it's honestly, it's a laughable. Sorry, I'm just moving. It's a laughable thing in many ways because like, I think one thing that I've learned is that you can't take yourself too seriously about it. And my journey with all of it, like I'm 43 now, and I used to be afraid to even talk about my age up until last year because I was like, that's something that I wanted to dive more into too, where you grow up in hip hop, it was always drilled into our heads that it's a young person's game and music is a young person's thing. And so when you're an adult, when you're older and you start to become in that veteran thing, and you're looking around and there's 18-year-olds that are selling out massive venues that are have way more followers than you and are way better looking than you, and this, and it really starts to hit you. And so this is only something in the past, like, I'm not even shitting you, like 6 months that I've really been able to like accept and embrace and be like, um you know what, I'm okay. I'm pretty content with all of this. But it still flares up here and there, and I guess through just my awareness of my own consciousness and where I fit into it all. But all of that like I feel like I'm on my second career in music. So like my first one started again in 20, or second one was in 2015. The first one was 2003. And so instead of looking at it like, oh, poor me, like it's everything's so hard, or like, um, you know, I don't fit, I'm too old for this. And it took me listening to some of my other friends being like, what? How are you? You can't think like that. Like, you're the most talented person I know. Like,
We love you, man.
we love you. And it was like it was kind of like this thing where I heard other people say the same thing I was saying, and I didn't like the way it sounded. And so I really just decided to like reclaim my own history and voice, and especially moving from hip hop into electronic music, where I was told that nothing that I did in the past mattered, or at least I'm forced to feel that way. And also that, I'm looking around and there's literally under a handful of people doing what I'm doing. So it's like, well, you don't fit in here. So figure it out. And it felt like I was stuck in this purgatory. And in a sense, like, my other friends who had kind of gone through it were like, they had to stop rapping and they were better producers. And so I was left feeling like my new album is called Outsider, because of this. And so funny enough, I'm already kind of one past that, but there's this whole like evolution that happened to me. And that whole time it was really difficult, because there wasn't this foundation that there was before, where it was like, well, we're all going through it together. It was like, no, you're on your own, and figure it out, otherwise you're gonna have to quit and not do this anymore. And so that I think a lot of things changed for me when I had a kid, and I started to look at life differently, and I started to like, also have a partner that was really supportive, and I wouldn't definitely not be able to do it without like her, or like my family and friends too, that were, even still to the day, when we all hit these low points again. And it's, there, I was just lucky enough to have those people there, to pick me back up, instead of just being self-destructive or quitting or whatever. And I think that it really, really became very obvious to me that, and this has been a really big thing for me the past years, is really embracing community and diving back into that, because I had removed myself from it, and we all had, because of the industry. And so you have like, you have agents and managers and people who like, you can't work with those people anymore. You already have that fan base. Don't talk to them. You're constantly, when money starts getting made and opportunities start happening, they're like, you're trying to maximize that. And it took me being completely paralyzed of like, because I always use the analogy, like, I had, we naturally build these defenses the same way that your mind does with your own traumas, like, and you believe your own bullshit. And so what I had done was, it felt like I built all these walls, but I didn't build a door for anyone else to come in and out of, or me. I was just stuck in this place by myself. And so a lot of the like realization when I was thinking about like, oh, why can't I do anything? Like, I can't write. I'd sit down, I was showing up, I can't get anything I like. I don't like any of this. It was all because I had removed myself from the community. That was the essence of why I did it in the first place. And so a lot of that was having to find those people again, or to reestablish those connections of like reaching out to people, be like, hey, like, and then also having the capacity to understanding that I need to give more than take. Because in a while a lot of musicians and a lot of artists or creatives, we're in, I mean, I guess a lot of people in general, when you're in survival mode, that's all you know, because all you can do, you're just grasping for whatever. And because it's such a difficult thing to do, you don't have this is like society now, like you don't have the capacity to even think about someone else's problems, because you're just like, well, how am I going to do it? And this is where that scarcity mindset really sets in. And so it wasn't until recently that I could really take a step back and be like, wow, like that, whether it was some sort of cosmic intervention of a person or a friend or someone in my family that was like, shit, I would never have gotten out of that without your help. And
Yeah.
so where I really started to make the effort to do that, and I'm still trying to do that for other people, where I see it, where once you've been through it, it's very obvious to see what's holding someone else back. And so
It's interesting because I think so. There's been a lot of really cool people that have come on this podcast that have all said very similar things to what you're saying now. Mo Mashiri was one of them. DJ Allgood was another. Robbie G was another one, and what they all kind of came to was like, if we all knew our position in a community, right? If we all knew our position in a community and then gave everything 100%, and actually, pardon me, because actually Terrence from All Was Lost was the one that like said this specific thing, but like, if we knew our position in the community and then gave our 100% of what that position was, and everybody else did that, and we all just met somewhere in the middle of all of that. So if like you had carrots and I had potatoes, and then we just shared, we both had carrots and potatoes, like that sense of support in the community would just be like the standard. Like I'm pretty sure that's the
key.
That's the key right there, right? And like,
it really is.
It's like it's beautiful that we have those kind of in like genres, and we have those in in these kind of niche market. AA is another one. The Good Book you kind of go into, or a church or something like that. You kind of see some of those standards being the pillar. But if we just took the foundation of that and actually rocked it, it's amazing, because as soon as you don't feel like an outsider, or the moment that you're like, I have value, but we need that reassurance, right? As soon as you have that, then it's amazing, like how that give and take just becomes like this like little bit of a comfort blanket. And I think we have that in family sometimes, right? We have that in friends sometimes. But if we would all just freaking do that for each other, do you imagine the utopia types like world we would have? Like, you know what I mean?
It'd be
Like,
amazing. Yeah.
right? Like everyone's just like, I do this really well, so I'm just gonna do it for everybody. And like, I do this really well, so I'm just gonna do it for everybody. Like, I think it would be just a really neat place to live. Because yeah, the amount of people that have sat right there and said, man, all it took was just a little bit of community. And I'm like, that's it. That's the golden ticket. It's the sense of belonging. It's that,
it's true. You're so hit the nail on the head. It's like, and it's funny that it can be right in front of you the whole time, and you can like, it's funny you mentioned the carrots and potatoes thing, because I recently tried to grow a lot of my own, as much food as I can of my own, and I had this idea. Yeah, I had this idea for this app that I was like, oh, it'd be cool if we like did this thing where you find a community of people, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna make a bunch of soap, and then I'm gonna trade you the soap, and you're gonna make the bread or whatever. And so every week we meet up and we give this stuff to each other, and we could pretty much remove ourselves from our reliance on grocery stores, and so it was interesting. And the more I brought it up, it's kind of one of those things where you're like, unfortunately, it's difficult, because there's always going to be these scenarios, unless you really like are, where someone's going to feel like they're doing more than the other, or there's going to be someone who's greedy, who's like, well, I did everything, so like somehow, with ulterior motives. And it's, I always think like, how, there's got to be a way that everything can work. But I think what you said about
it's ego.
Really, what you said
it's
about
ego. It's
everyone.
Ego. It's ego.
It is ego.
We need to let go
it's
of the ego of it. Like, no one gives a shit if you have more potatoes, man. Like, no one cares. We probably don't even need that many potatoes anyway. Like, good for you. You're the greatest. No one actually cares. Like, that's what. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm like, it's absolutely ego. Like, right? Because now if I got potatoes, then Buddy over here is like, well, I got the same soil, so I'm going to grow better potatoes than that and just prove that I'm cooler than him. But if we let go of the ego part of it, then no one really matters. We just need what we need and just move on, right? Yeah.
And that was kind of what I constantly was faced with in the hip hop community, where I was like, fuck, really? Like, can't we just like, and so eventually I was just like, you know what? I'm just abandoning shit. Not to say that I'm not still a part of it and still like representing the culture, but I was like, I just can't fucking survive. I can't do this with you guys. I'm jumping ship over there. And,
We're out of here, man.
I'm going to the raves, you know, like, and
totally.
you know, because there I was seeing people in their 50s like thriving. I'm seeing 70-year-old people having the time of their lives dancing, and I think that like it is really the ego thing. And when I look at the problems with like you know, as a community where, and I was just having this conversation, it's funny that this all aligned, but like I was thinking to myself, like, I wonder like what, you know, I always think back to hip hop, and you think about like this, you know, the essence of it, you know, it's created from poverty essentially, and you have all these, and so there was these elements, you know, you got graffiti, you got breakdancing, and there's just the way that it went about it, and the design of it, I think, was almost what kept everything about it in check. And so and I started to think about that, and I'm like, oh yeah. And then as soon as all that, when people stopped caring about that stuff, that's when it really turned into a monstrosity of, and then I started thinking about, well, what are the elements of life? Like, what are the elements of this culture? Like, what happened? And you really, when it really comes down to it, it's always the exact same thing that gets lost. And it has to do with, it's always ego driven and greed. And you're like, why can't everyone just, and as soon as you start to go too far down that path, people will be like, you're a communist.
You're
like,
yeah, totally.
You know, like,
you've lost your mind. That's it. No, yeah, totally. And that's the frustrating part. But like, yeah, if we were all in it just to like be satisfied, like, you know, I'm like, my goal in life, especially at this age, is like contentment, right? I'm like, man, I just want to, and maybe that's not maybe, that is where I'm at now. Like, I'm living the absolute dream, because all I got to do is, you know, get up and steep some tea like that. You know, that's like the one selfish thing that I do for myself. I'm like, oh man, I wish I had like instant hot water. I could go buy instant hot water, I suppose, if I really wanted to, but everything else is just such a luxury, right? Like, everybody's healthy and happy, and those that aren't, we try and sort it out. And like, you know, there isn't really too much pressure, but really that's just contentment, like that, and that's it. And so totally. I think, yeah, we all need to kind of get onto that. Yeah, how do we take the fundamentals of what works in a culture? Okay, so hip hop had fashion, artwork, right? It had music, it had, I don't want to say cuisine maybe so much, but there is some kind of like, I guess maybe things that you think of to eat when you're in the spaces that hip hop might be playing, I guess, right? But really it's just, yeah, so if we can just take those and make them big.
I think you need it. I think one thing that is people need a place to feel welcome. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's been a big thing of what's been removed. And so before, and I guess this was why, like, this is what I really started to notice, like the scene of itself across the country was dying. Is like, before there was so many weeklies in every city. Now, like, there's not even monthlies. There's not even really hip hop festivals anymore. There was one, and it kind of like was a catastrophe because they rioted, you know, the Vancouver, like the breakaway thing. And I really realized, like, that was it. It was like, it doesn't matter. Like, there was no like playground for people to go, and like, there wasn't a place for opportunities where you could be like, all right, well, you know, you can come on as an opener here. And I felt like now, and this is a bigger picture of what I've recently been talking about more, where the reason why those have all disappeared, especially in the past 3 years, was because it is not sustainable to do anything like that anymore in any way. And so part of the reason for that is because you have these big promotion companies, in the same way that the labels own streaming, now they also own the venues, and now they also own, you know, and so the same way that a playlist can not only the venues, they own the festivals, they own all these things. And so the same way that you can drop a no-name person in a big playlist and they'll get a bunch of plays, now they're doing it with venues. And so if you go to try to rent, or you don't, unless you own the restaurant or something, it's just not sustainable to like have a night like that anymore. Where it's like, and I think that's the most important thing, is people need somewhere to go get inspired, as well as to show what they've been working on. And as soon as that felt like it was removed, and again, not to say that it's not there in some places, but I think we were so lucky to have that everywhere. That was, I think, what I feel like. And so when I think about like the golden era of, I even the times that I had when I like decided to leave Sweatshop Union, in my head I was like, this will last forever. And then as soon as I left that group and started to kind of go down my own path again, and it was like everything changed, and I was like, oh shit, I should have just stayed there. Because I should have just stayed there, because at least there I had a crew and I had all these people with me that we could all gone through this together. But then it felt like, I was like, oh no, it's like the ice, it's like, it was like a glacier, and I was just drifting farther out into the ocean, and like it's slowly breaking off, and I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to do once I'm in the middle of nowhere by myself and there's nothing left? And I felt like now we've kind of like, we've entered this new era, and now there's so much more going on in the world too now, where it's bigger than just, the music.
And like it very much is way bigger than the music. And when we started this conversation, even behind the scenes, we were talking about the mental health part of it. Before we get to that in a big way, I kind of just want to say, do you think that these festivals now, because the way that house music has always kind of been represented is in the rave community, or at least that was kind of my experience with it. That's not necessarily true. I'm sure a lot of people went to their Y after hours or whatever and had a lot of great time and did ecstasy and hung out with like a bunch of people that they could not identify whether they were part of the LGBTQ community or not. That necessarily wasn't my experience. My experience was like, Carrington, where you had to like take a boat and another boat and get a note with a number and a name, and then that wasn't the guy, and you met some guy named Stoney on a bike down at the park, and then got mushrooms, and then like tried not. I
love those scenarios. Carrington's the best.
Yeah, right. Totally. And so, but do you think like, because of the way the festival scene is now, and the way that we kind of self-medicate for some of the stuff that we're going through, that it kind of just naturally lends itself to not only be super versatile, because they open up spaces for hip hop artists and up and comers, and it's a little bit more amalgamated, and you see kind of everybody there, like DJ Lyons in the comments, he's like 11, right, all the way up to like old folks that have been hanging out. They just want somewhere to go and like park a tent for a weekend or whatever. They don't even really know what's happening outside their motorhome, right? Do you think that it naturally kind of like has kind of taken on like these appendages that are hip hop and other music naturally?
I do. I think it is the reaction. Like, the action would essentially be what I'm talking about, and the reaction is just what underground culture is. And for me, it's come down to that. It's like, I used to have this idea that you couldn't be successful as an underground artist. And a lot of people, the idea, the term of underground culture is that you just didn't blow up, or that you never made it, only now to realize that's completely wrong. And now I'm looking at it like, all the shit that blows up, it starts in the underground and it's picked out of it. And so when you have these, like, whether it was, say, the city, if you have a city that's not like really down with partying, or like with parties, or like have all these strict laws that don't allow you to do it, underground culture always finds a way. And so like, whether that's where you get these warehouse raves, and that's where you get like, now there's no, there's the venues, and so people are doing all these pop-ups. It's like, hey, let's throw a fucking rave in a donut shop, whatever, let's do this. And then you also have, out of that, yes, I think you're completely right. It's like, you have this like, what, let's just do it, let's find, there's some trees over there, let's throw a party, and my uncle's gonna come, and then we can bring our kids, we can do this. And it's like, people always adapt, and I do think that it is a it is it is that essentially. And so, I think instead of like, as soon as you start being like, this is the only thing allowed here, and this is like, and it becomes like this money making scenario where um it's that's all it's about, it loses its soul and it instantly dies.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
how I see it.
yeah, it's I actually watched your reel about like big business and underground, and I found it really interesting.
Oh shit, yeah,
And yeah, yeah, and I can
still haven't
actually
been
give you
blacklisted yet.
no, 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 no. It's still up, but like, but it's interesting because as like when I got to the end of it, I was like, it's funny because yeah, I haven't experienced underground anything in the same way that you have, right? Like you're an artist, so it's a bit different. As a consumer, or a participant, to me, it's like I agree with the idea of what you're saying right now. Like if it stays there, then it never really made it. However, now I feel like it's gone so far that when we're like, if we hold it dear, like if we treasure it so much and we don't want to share it with like that, like we're like, then that's when we're like, no, it needs to remain underground. Like leave it up.
Mhm.
It just needs to stay down there because we cherish it so much that we just don't want to like send it upstairs for them just to like completely tear apart. And it's almost become, a term of endearment. Like, oh, I'm an underground hip hop artist. I immediately am like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Why, So I don't know. I feel like now, maybe that's me just being old. I don't know. Like maybe that's me being like on the other side of it. But now I find it like really charming when I hear that. I'm like, oh, okay, good. No one's gotten to them yet. No
Yeah,
one's
no,
destroyed them.
that's exactly it. And the funny thing is that perspective changes with age, or I shouldn't say with age, with experience of like, of when you see it also, like, for you and I, even just having children humbles you so much that you like, it's just definitely like this total annihilation of your ego. And then, that changes how you look at things. And so I often think the same way you do when I'm looking at something. I'm like, oh no, it's already been tainted. It's been tainted. And I think the reason, and this is why I guess Shambhala is what
Right.
it is because it's the only, if not one of a handful of untainted scenarios. And not to say that it hasn't been tainted. Everything has its thing, and I'm not like throwing shade at anything, but like
No.
they own the land. And so, and they're like completely like, we don't want any corporate sponsorship. We don't need any of your money. We just do our own thing. And as where you have every other one that you can't walk 20 feet without seeing a giant Molson Canadian inflatable, and you can't go this way. And it's like, everything isn't the only reason that, especially in Canada, that these things were able to exist in the first place is because the pillar of it was alcohol, credit cards,
Yeah.
military recruitment. It's like, and so when you remove that, what we thought was like this sustainable thing, it's not that sustainable without all that stuff. And so it's rare to find a community of things like that. And I think that's what's so special, from them even down to the small ones that just decide, like, you know what, we don't care if we grow, we're having a good time. And because essentially that's what that place was. It was a bush party that doubled every year until it got to 20,000 people.
I
And then
seen them. Sorry, yeah. I seen them add the post for this podcast tonight, and first of all, I was super honored that they would add it because obviously it's a whole entity in itself. But yeah, it's such an interesting it's such an interesting thing because I don't know if there's many other things that haven't been tainted like that. Like I don't even not that I'm super familiar with the states. Um,
mhm,
but like I can't even really think of like an entity that has remained kind of so honest. And I've never been, I'm going to be really honest, but I have people in my life that have, and when they come out of it, I'm like, it looks like the closest thing to a cult and a like a spiritual awakening. You know what I mean? Like it's just like I'm like that's really interesting. Like it seems so interesting. Like that's maybe more so where the medicine of the music kind of comes from. It's like not just it's not just the music, it's like the experience, going back to the community, and like not having these big corporate sponsors and all these people that walk around kind of selling their things out of the back of their, I wouldn't say car, but out of their backpack. And like, you know, that's that community that we were talking about earlier. And I'm like, maybe that's the standard that we need to shift towards, or maybe that's where I need to like draw my conclusions from, is things like Shambhala, where I'm like, okay, how can we get better in society? Like, that's it. The fact that they've been able to remain that way for so long is actually really impressive.
It's amazing.
Take some notes, yeah.
And it's even like, that's why I think you see a lot of these like boutique festivals, even like Base Coast is similar, and like these places that really, it's like they're just embracing and amplifying the essence of I guess rave culture, which is this whole idea of like, you know what, it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like or how you want to express yourself, because everything goes as long as it's not hurting someone else. And so when you go there, I remember my first experience with it, and as you know, over the 15 or so years I've gone, and then seeing someone transform, and like the transformation actually is, I narrowed it down to two things. I'm not sure how far we went back in it, and it really came down to like, you're either, and it's not just there, it's just these kind of raves or places that do that, it's like you're either healing or you're getting inspired, because you're not, a lot of times for me anyway, things had happened, whether it was people, I lost people I loved, or that was always, it was either one of those two things that was happening. And so no matter what, I was walking away, like sometimes you're going to go and like, you'll be crying the whole time, and someone's always there to be like, you know what, so it's, let me this, or you meet someone that does this, or you walk away and you'll be like, man, I'm so inspired, I cannot wait to get home and do this, because I just learned so much, and I saw the best of the best doing what they do, and now I just want to try to get to that. You see the thing, the standard of like what's possible. And so the beauty of it is you can be there, and you know, you can turn around and have someone who's like, you know, has a giraffe head on and just says something super random to you, and they're like, yeah, like, I'm the CEO of this company, and then you're like, you'll never see me again, and like, I don't care. And then you'll have someone else who's like a mystic wizard or something that's in the street, and you run into them at an Esso in Revelstoke later, and you're like, what the fuck, you're that guy. And they're like, oh yeah, I own this gas station or whatever. And you're like, what? And so like, I think
it makes perfectly great sense. Like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah,
it is. And it's just this idea that, you know, I think the outside world and society in general, it's like, I saw something recently that really resonated with me, and it was, I don't know, it was like an influencer post or something. I'm sure they copy pasted it from somewhere, but it did make a lot of sense. And it was this guy, and he was talking about the idea of feeling young, and the only thing that really keeps you young is the ability to excite your inner child. And as long as you can spend your life exciting your inner child, you'll never go young, you'll never age a day in your life. And I was like, fuck, that's so true. Like, and for me, the excitement of my inner child came from music and art, and it still does. And now that I have a child, and I'm also seeing them grow from like nothing, and seeing that excitement, you're like, where did I lose that? Like, how did I lose that? And you know, like, and so it's this eternal chase for that. And I feel like whether it's through enlightenment or other things, you know, part of the reason why we haven't discussed it on here was wanting to start my own podcast of this thing, was that, you know, I kept being in these scenarios where I would meet or work with people who, even outside of their accomplishments as musicians or artists, they were just like this beacon of like, they walked in the room and you're like, no wonder everyone wants a piece of you, because you're incredible. And so the more I talked to these people and the more I would have conversations, I was more blown away by what they had been through once I got to know them. And I almost found that anyone that I met that was really, really like I can tell when someone has things figured out, and it's never it's never through like luck. It's like there's so many other layers to what made them get there, whether that, you know, was what they went through in their own life and what they overcame, or what their process of healing. But it happened so many times where I was like, whoa, if you could, if someone else could just have heard our conversation, I feel like it would have changed everything. And I wish I could have heard what you just said, or what you just told me. And sometimes you have artists, I think, and this is the beauty of it, that's part of their show. So when you watch their show, you leave and you're like, oh my God, I look at the world differently now, because you just showed me a different world. And so that's been something that I've been more aware of now. And now I'm going into whether I'm a fan, like a listener at a show, or the one doing my show myself, like how much of that are you giving to other people, and how much of that am I taking when I go to a show, where I'm like, being able to walk away, just being like, or sitting in the crowd, like they'll say something so beautiful that it brings me to tears, or I'll look around and like, or vice versa. I'll be saying something and I'll look and I'll see people crying and be like, wow, that makes me want to cry. Like, this is the human experience that we're sharing. And so much of my life, you spend, getting lost in the bullshit of your ego, not realizing that these connections are everywhere around you. And that's kind of now where I look at things, and all I want to do is I want to tap into those things. And that was something that was hard for me to come to until I had a child, really, where I was like, every day was just like, she would bring something to me and be like, Dad, look at this. Like, this is incredible. And it could be like a stick. And you'd be like, I mean, that is a pretty cool looking stick. Like, I don't, like, or like, a glass or whatever. And the more I'd go down that path, I was like, yeah, like, how did I forget that? And so that's where I think, when you say, like, when you get that, and not to say that the only way there as a kid, like, is having a kid, but, the grass becomes greener, like, everything just seems a little brighter. And there was another thing that I wanted to touch on too, that I saw recently, that was like, it was this woman talking about, there's really two things. There's really two ways to look at it. Is the world, do you think that it's out to get you, or is it benefiting you? That's it. That's the only two things that are happening. And you have to pick which side you're on. Like,
that's the way we should start our day, honestly, like, really. And to like put yourself into that space, because as soon as you can kind of acknowledge it, like, then it puts you in a better place to use the tools that you need to either really enjoy yourself, or to try and heal from some of the things that you think that you are hiding from.
Totally.
It's out to get you. I absolutely think you should do a podcast. And I also, and here's why. There is these amazing people that are in the comments right now. King Handsome's in there with Wool Life, and Bradley, and the guys from Let's Vibe TV crew down in the States. They're all hanging out. And unfortunately, some of those people actually that are in there, like, lost somebody. And all's, last night, yesterday, the day before, whichever.
Oh, no.
We're losing people all the time, right? And so the more stories that people have to identify with, the more conversations that people identify with that are like, yeah, that sounds just like me. Or, that push people to go and use hashtag 988, which is like the national hotline, right? For Canada and the States. Or the more people that can identify with people that you talk to, but also you as well. It just gets that conversation out there where we can start letting go of some of the stigma and some of the things that keep us quiet, or keep us behind big bolted doors, or keep us from, just not letting people in. And they say that, the suicide rate amongst artists is massive. Probably, it's actually close to dentists, and it gets even higher. Wow. With males, and it gets, astronomical in the blue collar sector. And I don't even want to go touch into like the drug world right now, because, there was 35 overdose deaths in my hometown in 1 month, not that long ago. So it's absolutely horrendous. But if people would understand where they can go to get the tools that they need, or they can see people that look just like them, saying the things that they would say, I think it's important. I think it's massive, and I think it makes a difference. And it's not just that. It's like, if you talk to three people and I talk to three people and then those people talk to some people and we're able to kind of, I don't want to obviously put everybody's personal conversations on blast because not all of
Yeah,
them have that place, but I definitely understand what you mean when you're like, oh, I walked away being like, oh, that really would have made a difference, and it does make a difference, and it's,
it does. Well,
yeah,
the
it
theme that
does.
I like, and I'm comfortable talking about this even before it's happened, is that I had done a few I had done a few pitches for the concept that I had, and in the pitch I kind of
Mhm.
included this thing, which I even say like word for word. Like, I don't quote Kanye West often, but there's something that he said where he was like, I won't take advice from anyone who's not doing better than me. And I thought about that, and I was like, that kind of applies to mental health too. Like,
Mhm.
because like most people's experience with a therapist or a counselor is they go, and you have all those things that we had kind of talked about in the pre thing, where like it's like, well, I already know what they're going to say. Like, I know more than this person, they haven't accomplished this, or they don't know what my life is like. And it wasn't until I found someone who I could respect and be like, oh, they do actually. And and so when I think about those times when I've had those chats with people who are my peers, and not even having any idea about what that song was about, and when they tell me, and you're like, holy shit, that changes everything. And if when I see people who are are willing to be vulnerable for the sake of others, is that's where that's where you can amplify that healing without even someone. You can share those experiences with people, and that to me was like, I was like, yo, like that's kind of the premise of what I want to do, is like, I want to I want to highlight the people. I'm not saying that you have to, if you come on, you have to tell me your deepest, darkest things, but
You're
like
right.
most of the conversation leads there anyway. And if people are comfortable talking about it, so like, what, and this comes from like so many different levels of things, like whether that's grief or finances or your own disabilities or your traumas, whether that, can be, because in the end, we kind of are just our, like I look at human beings now just as like we're all just walking balls of trauma. And it's like
Absolutely.
some people, whether it's privilege or not, you have the ability or the opportunity to heal. So like, and it's crazy to me that something like a stigma could stop you from doing that. And people will go to their graves and not
Hmm.
realize that you could have been happy this whole time, like, and that's how powerful the human mind is. And so like, I often would get in these conversations where I'm like, I remember one of the books that I had read, I can't remember the exact one, but it was talking about how, you know when you get into this like victim mentality of yourself, which we all have been there, and and I think the reference they use, like, say you're in this mode and you're like in like, maybe having suicidal thoughts, whatever, something really like terrible, and out of the blue you get a text from, like, say, like, uh someone that, an ex or something, that you were just like, it didn't go your way and you were in love with them. All of a sudden your whole mentality shifts, and you're out of that, and you're like, oh my god, this is like, so why can't you do that without it? Like, why can't you shift your mentality that way? Because you can't. It's like, it's just, you just have to believe the idea. And so for me, like, there's a song that I wrote, called "Got Away," that's about like, one of the verses is about suicide, and the other one is about, um someone, who I lost to cancer. And um in that, like, sorry, kind of forgot where I was going with this. um but like this idea that, where was I going with that? Sorry. What were we
Well,
talking about
no,
before?
it's really the idea of stigma, and I think artists have the responsibility and the space to do that now. And you know what? It doesn't even necessarily need to be a podcast, but to go on stage
Hmm.
and be like, do these little introductions, these interludes, and also the lyrics. Like, there is really not much to pull apart anymore. There's not a whole
Yeah.
lot of cryptic messages happening anymore. It's very much like, this is what happened. This is why I'm suffering. This is why you can relate to it. And I think that that type of transparency is like, it's actually um, it's so fundamental. Peer support workers are probably the growest. I don't want to say are the growest, but they are definitely in the list of growing careers right now, and that's because people are tired of hearing the person in the fancy suit say, like, there's
Yeah.
it's okay, you'll be better, you're gonna be better. We don't necessarily want to hear that. We want something that we can relate to, that's a little bit more palatable. And I think as artists, I don't want to say you hold a certain responsibility, but I sure do appreciate the people that are willing to, like yourself, that are willing to just talk about it without even really talking about it. You don't have to sit here
Hmm.
and be like, man, this one night I was gonna, I was like, it doesn't even need to be that heavy, because it's not even that heavy topics that are really the issue, right? It's something as common as, like, I just had a really bad day at work and this guy cut me off, and then I came home and I forgot to grab milk, and like, those are the type of pressures that people are going through on the day to day, that are that added on everything else they've been dealing with their entire life, just feels like it's too much. It's just too
Totally.
much. And so it doesn't even have to be these big, like, okay, now we're gonna talk about today children, we're gonna talk about mental health. It's like, holy crap, parenting wasn't necessarily what I thought I was gonna be doing at this time. But here I am doing that, and then somebody's just like, yeah, actually, that's kind of how I feel about that.
Well, yeah, you go back and you're like,
Somebody
now I
suggested
know
that
what
you
they were
said.
all going through. Like, well, I do remember where I was going to go with this now.
Okay, beautiful.
Um, and since we're on this topic of suicide, essentially,
Yeah.
and one thing for me that I had never once, again, this comes back to stigma, and this is how I felt with even ADHD. There was this stigma that, like, and why I think there's often such a big stigma with that is that even being diagnosed with it, essentially, it's coming from your parents.
Mm.
And so a lot of parents don't want that to be, they don't want that. And so they're like, no, you don't have that. There's no way. Not knowing that they have it and all these things. And so when it comes to, like, even the idea of having suicidal thoughts, the reality is every single person on earth is going to have them and has had them. And so this is something that I had never once mentioned, or I just, in my head, I was like, you can't, because it's like, I can't, it almost feels like you couldn't think that. And it wasn't until I had a friend that was like really going through it, where he had called me and was like, basically like, man, I'm like really messed up right now. And I'm just having really messed up thoughts. And then I was like, I had never once in my entire life said this to anyone. And I was like, dude, I've had that. I've felt that way. I know what you're talking about. And like, I've thought that myself. And I had never once. And when I said that to him, I was like, oh my God, I feel so like I've been holding that in my whole life. And I've never been able to say that. Cause like, even when a doctor, like, they're like, so how are you feeling? Or, whether you're trying medications or anything, I would never say that, because I'm like, well, I'm not that. I would never do that. And even if I
Right.
wouldn't do it, but there's this relief in just admitting that. And I think it's almost like we as human beings, like, once you've been there, it's such a powerful thing to even just say that out loud, or to say it to someone that you love or you trust enough that isn't going to go and run that, put it all over the internet, but just to be like, because the reality of it is, unless you're like the most privileged person ever, that everything is perfect, you've definitely had those thoughts, even if knowing that you're never going to do it, and that you never would, and that but there was just this like liberation in it. And so that was something that I've brought up when I have friends who are going through it, or even myself when I'm going through it. And it's just being honest with yourself about that. And it's just feeling heard, I think, is the main thing for all of us. Is just, it's so easy for all of us to live in this world where we're constantly separated and divided in all these ways, where we feel alone. And like, especially when we were like physically separated from each other, where you're not allowed to go outside and do this, it was like through the roof of just like addiction, all these things happening. And so being so aware of it at the time and going through it myself now, and now that's part of why I even make the music that I make, or the art that I make. And when people ask you, like, me, like, what is the message of what you're doing? And so someone I really, really looked up to asked me that recently. And it was right before Shambhala. This is a pretty crazy story. I won't go fully into it, but an artist that I've dreamt of working with for so long. We met, and they were like familiar, like actually familiar. They were playing one of my songs in their set, and so
Oh
I'm
wow.
just like, whoa, what? That's insane! Like we're talking about, and they were like, we should work together on something, and I was like, so we started shooting the shit, and they asked me this question that I had never thought, and they said, "What are you about? Like, what is your like, what are you about? Like, what's your message?" And I was kind of like, shit, like what am I about? And my first thought was like, you know what? The songs that you're playing, obviously, it's hard to mix those things in dance music because it has to be really masked in there, like, because it is such a like high energy kind of vibe. And I was like, well, to be honest, what I'm really about is like all the heartbreak, all the childhood trauma that I'm facing, and the healing and the therapy that I'm going. If I were to really break down like what I think is the most important part of my music, that's what it is. And it's like that message is so, whether it's my views on the world, and so much of that experience, it's felt like I wasn't allowed to do this and I wasn't allowed to talk about this. And it wasn't until I answered that question that I was able to really lean into it and be like, you know what, that is what I'm about. So why the fuck am I not talking about this? And why am I afraid to say this? And because it is, life is short. We have such a small amount of time, like 100 years if you're lucky.
If you're,
It's
yeah, that's really
it's
stretching it. Like,
it's really stretching it. That's like the
yeah,
like, all right, here's the cutout of what it could be. But like those who, you know, we could wake up tomorrow and one of us could be gone, like, and that's something that I've really taken for granted a lot in my life. And it wasn't until I started losing people, and so, thinking about how, you know, and it is hard to think, like, when you're going through it, it's hard to be like, every day is a gift. I fucking woke up to sunshine and I
yeah,
meditated. It's
right, yeah,
difficult.
sure you did. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. And that's the thing. I think being real about all that stuff. It's interesting when you're talking. I just kept thinking like, um, you know, if we would just say the things, right? Like, I'll never forget this one time, and it wasn't even a negative thing; it was a positive thing. Like this privilege, we're all at this like horseback riding place or whatever, and
Hmm.
this lady's just going on about all the things, like, okay, this, and you need to, grab the cinch and throw it around the withers, and she's just going down her miles an hour, and I like know these things in the back of my mind, so I'm like, yeah, and there's a bunch of us girls, and we're like standing there, like, and then at the end, like, all of us get, we leave, and we're all just kind of staring at each other, and finally I was just like, did anybody understand what she meant? And everyone in the room was like, no, you know like, not a clue. Meanwhile, we're all stressing out, so uncomfortable, because we all think the other person knows, and maybe we didn't learn that, and how do I not know what they know? Because no one said anything that entire time. Had one other kid just been like, I don't know what she's talking about, we would have probably enjoyed that 2 hours so much more. Oh, you don't understand? Okay, well, we'll just ask more questions then, or we're just gonna
Hmm.
take the time to learn. And it's like we just were so worried about what other people would think about us. We just sat there in our discomfort for so long and probably didn't learn anything that day because we were just so stressed out about this one thing that we didn't know. And so as you were saying that, it's like, if that's all I'm not saying that's all it's going to take, but I do think that there's so much value in just saying the things, like, to say that we've never thought about suicide, or that we have never thought about harming ourselves. Like, that's an unrealistic thing, yet we all think that about each other. That person,
Everyone.
that's right. That it's like, oh, that would be crazy for everybody to think like that. It's like, no, you think about it just off the cuff. That's just how your brain works. We watch content, and I say content very loosely, but we watch, the whole entertainment industry is based off of these like human emotions. So to act like we don't feel any of them is just, it's unrealistic, and it's bizarre that we've just kind of carried on all this time, and that we're willing to give any time out of our potential 100 years away to that discomfort is, I don't want to say it's disheartening, but it's frustrating, you
Yeah,
know, because all
it
it
is.
takes is us just to say something about it.
It really is. And you like, I think one thing that I've really understand. And one thing that I've really like been focusing on myself lately has been like recognizing that every single person's journey is different, and what works for one person isn't always going to work for the next. But there's always something you can learn from every interaction and every person and that I encounter in my life. And so a lot of those like a lot of that journey is just kind of, I guess, what we come back to, that what we were talking about earlier, is to just feel like you're welcome, or like that you are heard or seen, or that you have a safe place. And so I think, again, back to this, whether it's the rave community or whatever culture, it could be the metal, any kind of scene that kind of embraces that idea that, hey, you know what, whether you are what you felt like an outsider or not, you're welcome here. And so it is this idea of creating these safe spaces for people, and that to me is such a beautiful thing. The same way that you wouldn't want to bring your toddler or your baby to walk around in an area that's full of needles or something. You're like, you want it the safest place for them so they can build this confidence. And the reality of it is that not everyone has that. And there's so many people that I know in life, like I feel so lucky even to just have my parents, or like to have the people I have in my life. And not to say that every person has different struggles, but just to like, learning, and this is through things like meditation or just gratitude, being able to like have the awareness to be grateful, to be like, you don't, there's always something to be grateful for, like, and until you start practicing those, it's the same thing as like going to, in my opinion anyway, is like going to a gym. Like I've been doing this thing where I'm trying to get in shape. And so like when I started doing pull-ups, I was like, I could barely do 3 of them. And now I'm at like maybe like 10 or something. And so like you're slowly doing it. You're like, this is so hard, but I can do it. And then, a couple days later, you're like, oh shit, I did 2 extra ones and it's not any harder than it was. I think the same thing goes for like these kind of conversations, and just the awareness of like, just that if you're, everything is about this balance. And so if you do have one of those things where you have that knowledge, or maybe you have the privilege or whatever it is, it's really nice when that can be shared with those who might not have that, and vice versa. Like, and again, not everything is gonna be like that, but to me, that's the beauty of living now, where you're like, that's the things that bring me to tears randomly in the street, or like when a Disney song comes on and I'm like, oh fuck, and you see these experiences where you're like, shit, that's what it was the whole time, and I never understood it until I just saw it. And I couldn't understand the struggle or the thing, and now I'm just like, it's almost like if you're looking for it, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
It is. It's. I'm so grateful to be one here. Because not everybody is here right now, but also to like be in that space. It took me a little while to understand, I guess. Even what the hell you were talking about. When we're kids, we kind of trench all that stuff. But yeah, I think it's super important that everybody takes the time to just really understand what that means, because it doesn't necessarily have to be like stop and smell the roses, but I'll tell you what, like after wearing wet shoes for too many days, like I appreciate dry socks. Like, you know what I
So
mean? Like,
straight, yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, like for real. And it's such a blessing to be able to like hand that down. My kid the other day was driving me crazy, and I was just like, oh my God, you're not wearing socks with your shoes? And he's just like, no. And it was just like, it made me realize, like, I fucking made it. My kid has never felt the discomfort of wet socks, shoe socks situation. He's never felt the discomfort of like taking his shoes off at a buddy's house with, like, he's never had that feeling. It's just like, yes, we did it. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Onwards, right? Like, it's all good. Like, and it's just like things like that. Life is so good. I think I got another question before we wrap this up, but I think you guys should be taking notes in the comments. All we got to do is be kind to each other, right? Like a little bit of sense of community. Let's say the things like, you know, just, you know, it's really, it doesn't sound that complicated, and sometimes it feels that complicated, but like just to remind ourselves that it can just be like that easy. Just bring it back, a couple deep breaths, and bring it back to like the standards. Because man, did you say some shit tonight? Like honestly, like
Right.
there's the toolbox, there's the toolbox, there's the standard. Like none of that sounds complicated, but I think it's not. I think it is such a cool thing to realize. Like, yeah, it is that easy. We got to be kind with each other and appreciate a little bit.
Yeah. I
You know?
really, yeah, I appreciate
Yeah.
the sparking those conversations. So
You're a beautiful human. I really,
you too.
thank you. Before we get out of here, I just want to know, like, what advice would you give some young, some little youth that's coming up in the music scene, whether it be electronic, hip hop, whatever. Like, what advice you would give to them?
I think it would be to, and I guess you'll probably, everyone kind of hears this in different ways, but like, one, obviously starting with like, build with what you have around you. Like, we're all going to try to reach for things that are unattainable, and yes, have big dreams, but like, just like what we were talking about with, it's everywhere. But often I think I spent a lot of my life trying to go upstream in this idea of go with the flow, or the path of least resistance. But like, there's probably more than enough opportunities around you to start building from, and to really build a solid foundation. And I think, focus on that, focus on your community that's immediately in you, and just really just be your authentic self. Like, don't hold back on, like, I don't know. I think I didn't do that a lot, and I felt like I had to play these stupid games of like the industry. Like, don't even think about the industry. Just think about you and your community and the people you love and the people that love you, and build outwards from there. Because I think as soon as you start overstepping those things or neglecting love from those people, that's where you get lost, and that's where the message gets construed. So just like, focus on that, and you'll be great.
Yeah, you heard it here. Before we get out of here, I just want to run you guys through the standard kind of at Pinecase. So, for those of you, man, I'm really sorry. I'm actually getting choked up. I do know what happened over the last few days, and I just want to extend my sincerest apologies to everybody who's been affected for all of the reasons. And I'm not going to get into specifics because some of them are very personal, but I absolutely can appreciate the tremendous heartbreak, whether it be a child or an artist or a friend or somebody that you idolize. Obviously, those are vastly different. But our hotline is open. So 250-289-3948 will put you straight through to one of our beautiful volunteers. It's 24/7. The line is open all the time. You guys just text in with your name and number. For those of you who don't know the drill, it is 100%. It's 100%. I don't want to say it's 100%. It's 100% whatever you need it to be. If you guys are looking for any sort of resources, naloxone kits, if you're looking for suicide prevention, if you're looking for CPR, if you guys are looking for somebody to bitch about because your wife is upsetting you, that's totally cool. Just call the number. It's 250-289-3948. With that being said, hashtag 988 will get you through to the big national, the big national number. Hashtag 988 Calco, if you don't mind. Actually, I think it's Candy hanging out in the comments tonight. If you can put that up there for everybody. Hashtag 988 is also, it's fully confidential, 24/7. It'll put you through to a crisis nurse immediately. For those of you looking for naloxone kits, you guys can pick them up at a pharmacy near you. Just ask for a few. If you want any details on that, you can go ahead and reach out to us as well. You guys will need 2 or 3 kits. You might need to use those kits 2 or 3 times to get people out of the state that they are in. You cannot harm somebody that is not on opiates. The demonstration that we had actually was a pregnant lady. So if they're on something else, they're not going to have a reaction to that. With that being said, if they are not waking up and that's not causing a reaction, please make sure you guys call 911 and get everybody doing what they need to be doing to help with whatever situation that you're dealing with. 250-289-3948 and hashtag 988. You guys use the numbers, please. You're not alone. We're here. Everyone is around you. We care. And everyone's just too cool. There's too many cool things happening nowadays. People are capable of too many interesting and beautiful things for you guys to be feeling alone. So reach out to the people that you need to. Just like DJ Allgood says, like, pew, pew, pew. Just send out those quick messages, you guys. Just like, if you're thinking about somebody, just like hit them up in their, in their messenger, or hit them up directly. Like, takes 2 seconds to just say like, hey, what's good? Thinking about you, whatever. And it does make a difference. I know I appreciate getting those messages when I see them. So let's make sure that nobody's feeling left out at any point in time. They're like, Def3, darling. Thank you so
thank
very
you.
much for hanging out with us and everybody at Pinecase tonight. I really do appreciate your insight, your talent, and your experiences. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I mean, let's do this again, honestly. Like, I think it's amazing, like, seeing what you have going on here and seeing, I'm just now I just didn't even really realize that there was comments, and I'm looking at it all. And I think that, it's so like great that there's these services for people. And even on a, whether it's an artist or a person to person basis, like, even I answer all my messages, at least I try to, if there's questions that people have, or like, again, same thing, like, you just want someone to say what's up to. If I have the time, I totally will do that. And I just think that this is such a cool thing. Like, I was unaware of what you had going on here. So I think it's super amazing. Like, you should really pat yourself on the back for doing all this, and I would love to come back, and I could talk about this all day long, and hopefully I can get something like this myself going, and I'll have you on it. So
yes, definitely. Yeah, I would love to be a guest. I'd love to take invitations for like that. It's nice to sit on the other side once in a while, because obviously I like try to, like, even tonight I'm like, you don't need to talk about yourself all the time. They're really here for him, like, but it gets hard. So
hopefully I didn't. That's like, I feel like that. It's like I sometimes feel like I'm doing that. I'm like, I think just hearing other people's stories is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, once again, you guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. We really do appreciate you. Again, we're not too far away, so you guys can go ahead and hit up those numbers that are in the comments. Thank you, Candace and Calico, for moderating the conversation tonight. We do appreciate you guys. If you guys are just hanging out and bored, you can go and check out the Pinecase community. There's a ton of things happening over there right now, and there's also a link to your YouTube page over there. So if you guys haven't checked out Def3's music, please go and treat yourself to a wonderful evening. I should have done it earlier in the day, and I knew it, but I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this, do my thing, whatever, throw some tea on. I was like, we don't need to get into the particulars, but when I put your music on, it brought me back to this like really glorious, fun, like super casual time in my life. And by the time I had to come in to do the podcast, I had literally taken my rug out of my living room and it was like batting it over the chain link fence. Like, that's how I don't know what happened, but I was like casually and just took like a hard left right into the hood, and it felt so really good. So yeah, you guys go ahead and hit up the YouTube link over in the community. Once again, thank you, you guys. I guess that's it. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Yeah, thank you.
We stay strong. We stay
The
strong.
further you take my rights away, I'ma run to it, refuse to hear my voice. Speak loud when I spit it, but you don't get it. You just wanna be a side critic. See somebody else showing hate in the side of the road with it. Now how would you feel standing on the sideline and watch the color of a nation deteriorate over time? The flag real high, but compassion 6 feet below. Now you're searching for that justice that decided to never show. Deny my place, I'm back with a trace. Keep up the pace, tight lace, game face. Get back in the race. Whatever they did could never be undone. Every dark night ends with the rising of the sun. Squandered every wealth that's built from the mud. Squandered every wealth that's built from the blood. Squandered every wealth that's built in chains. Stolen from the ancestors running through my veins.
With the strength of 1,000 lion and the strength of 1,000 giant, we stay strong. We stay strong. With the strength of 1,000 elephant and the strength of 1,000 tiger, we stay strong. We stay strong. stay strong.
I can see. Run to the light at the end of the tunnel, winner.
We stay strong.
I can't breathe. We're gonna get oxygen without the justice system.
We stay strong.
And I know, gotta keep my head together.
We stay strong.
Don't doubt me, please don't doubt me.
We stay strong.
Tell me, how can we be strong if we still shooting? Tell me, how can we be strong if we still looting? Tell me, how can we be strong if we still hating? Please tell me now, please.